Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. It's Dr. Ben here. Happy to be with you. And we are in the groove. We're getting into this TMS series. If you've missed the first couple episodes, or I guess there's really been one, there was kind of this reintroduction a couple episodes ago. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, a little bit of a healing journey also that I shared about. And then last week, I guess it was a little more than a week ago, we talked about what is TMS. And I'm not going to rehash that. And hopefully you have some idea of what TMS is. Hopefully you've listened to that video in the past. But just to put it real briefly, TMS, tension myositis syndrome, is otherwise known as the mind-body syndrome. We're going to be talking all about that today, and specifically how it manifests, how we experience symptoms of various sorts. We'll talk about some of the types of symptoms that are associated with TMS, but spoiler alert, it really can be anything. So we're going to be talking about that. And we're also going to be talking about how it manifests. And spoiler alert there, it's super complex. And long story short, these are all theories, ideas. There's some physiology that we're going to talk about, but also it's all beyond complex. And we are just mysterious beings, right? Multidimensional, mysterious beings. Anyways, let's talk about how TMS manifests, how this mind-body syndrome manifests. If you listen to the prior episode about what TMS is, hopefully you already know that TMS is a totally normal and universal phenomenon. I think one of the big take-home messages from that episode is that if I were to describe it and define it in today's world, this is obviously the work of Dr. Sarno that I've been studying for a long time and regurgitating and digesting and hopefully like distilling in a more he's great. He's a great teacher, obviously. But I think that a lot of people read the books and still don't really get it, still aren't really experiencing the healing that is possible with understanding the science and physiology and psychology of TMS. So anyways, one of the things that I think really helps is just understanding the universal normal nature of TMS. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just the way that our body experiences life. Therefore, I talked about how if it were up to me, I would really just simply remove syndrome from the whole definition, because syndrome makes it seem like there's something wrong. And it's really important psychologically. We'll talk later in later episodes about how we heal and transcend the symptoms of TMS. But long story short, it's really important that we simply stop criticizing ourselves, stop believing that there's anything wrong with ourselves. And in other words, really start accepting and embracing ourselves just the way we are, just the way we feel, regardless of how intense our symptoms are. We just kind of are with it. And I talked about that a couple episodes ago, how in my experience of healing some lingering chronic things that were quite debilitating for me, one of the biggest things for me was the mindset around it. In fact, that was the biggest thing. And specifically with regard to that mindset, was really exploring this idea of, can I be okay with myself if this is the way life is forever, for eternity? Can I be okay with myself? Can I love myself? Can I be myself? Can I be with myself? Can I express and experience life in this state forever? And of course, the ironic thing is, once we totally sit with that and be with that and accept that state, which is not easy, it's maybe the most challenging thing. But once we're there, then, and maybe only then, we can really start opening up to experience healing. So anyways, that's kind of, rehashing some of the conversations that I had in the last couple of weeks. Now, this week, we're going to talk about how TMS manifests physiologically, how this mind-body phenomenon, the mind-body syndrome, again, I don't really like the syndrome term, but how this syndrome, quote unquote, manifests in our body. So This is all the teaching of Dr. Sarno. Again, essentially this is where the term tension myositis syndrome comes from, because you think about these words: tension, constriction. We feel tension in our muscles primarily, and then myositis means inflammation of the muscle. So we experience tension in our vasculature, in our muscles. It can be on a, of course, we can flex our muscles, and that creates tension in our muscles. But when we're talking about tension myositis syndrome, the physiology of that, it's essentially the clasping down of our vasculature and what are termed neurovascular bundles. So they're, in our bodies, wherever we've got blood circulation, we also have nerves, we also have veins. Of course, the arteries carry blood from the heart to our periphery, and the veins carry blood from the periphery back to the heart. And then all along the way, we also have nerves that kind of trigger and control how the arteries and veins are firing and contracting and relaxing. And also, of course, those nerves are carrying and sending and receiving information to other target areas of our body. So anyways, these neurovascular bundles, they constrict under tension, they constrict. That limits blood flow, and we create a hypoxic, otherwise known as, low blood oxygen in our muscles, in our tissues. And that can be in our extremities, in our legs, in our arms. That can be in your liver, that can be in your lung, that can be in your thyroid gland, that can be in your pancreas. We can experience or create this tension and restriction and constriction of blood flow and nerve flow, and create that hypoxic environment in any part of the body, just from psychology, truly. And that's why it's otherwise called the mind-body syndrome. It's because we think tension creating thoughts, and then we experience tension in the body, and then that tension is reflected in target organs downstream from the hypoxic events or the lack of blood flow and oxygen to those areas of our body. And then, of course, our body is being designed and programmed and innervated the way that they are. Those organs or muscles that experience a lack of oxygen and a lack of blood flow then send signals back to the brain through those nerves that something's wrong, that like, oh my gosh, that's where the situs or inflammation term gets thrown into there, because when we have a lack of oxygen at any part of the body, then metabolism slows down. And when metabolism slows down, then different sort of byproducts accumulate in those organs or muscles. And then, those byproducts create inflammation on a, in this case, in the case of tension myositis syndrome, on a very subtle, microscopic, minute sort of way, non-pathological sort of way. But our brains interpret that signal as, oh my gosh, something's wrong in my back, something's wrong in my knee, something's wrong in my liver, something's wrong in my thyroid gland, something's wrong in my, cervical spine, whatever it is. That's what the body is connected to the brain in these sort of ways. And the brain just interprets these phenomenon as trouble. Oh my gosh, we're in trouble. When in reality, it's such a benign, minute, microscopic sort of phenomenon, but we're in that sort of quote unquote fight or flight response. And that kind of leads to the deeper side of the conversation, which is related to the state of our autonomic nervous system, which plays into this whole phenomenon. So anyways, tension myositis syndrome, constriction of the neurovascular bundles, lack of blood flow and oxygen to cells, tissues, muscles, and that is interpreted by the brain as pain or discomfort or something's wrong, when in reality, nothing's really wrong. And what comes before that, you could say, what comes before the tension or the psychological thinking that creates the tension, that creates that constriction, that creates that inflammation, lack of blood flow, etc. What can precede that is, like I kind of alluded to, the state of our autonomic nervous system, the state of our sympathetic and parasympathetic balancing of our nervous system. And maybe you already know that our autonomic nervous system, I like to call it the automatic nervous system. That's kind of how I remember it. There's the autonomic nervous system, and then there's the somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is what we can control. The autonomic nervous system, automatic. We can't really control it, except we kind of sort of can. But in essence, the autonomic nervous system is working in the background automatically on autopilot. It's autonomic, right? So anyways, most people in our current world, you probably have experienced this or known this or learned this at some point. Most people are operating in a little bit of an autonomic imbalance just because of the nature of the world in which they live, the nature of thoughts, the nature of consumption of news and media and fear-based things that kind of trigger emotions and past traumas, and just our, dwelling on life and stress and finances and family and work, and boom, boom, everything piles up. And we find ourselves normalizing the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. We become accustomed to more stress in our body. And that stress kind of just raises our, stress response, the sympathetic nervous system response, and lowers the degree to which the parasympathetic nervous system is able to balance things. So at any given point in time, we have some amount of sympathetic nervous system activity and some amount of parasympathetic nervous system activity. And of course, ideally, when we're just living, when we're just existing, when we're just being in our world, we should be predominantly parasympathetic. We should be relaxed. We should be chill. We should be healing and digesting and processing and present. That's what the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system is. However, like I said, most people aren't there. Most people are living with more stress, with more imbalance in that direction. And it's really important that we don't think like sympathetic bad, parasympathetic good, because of course we need the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And that's what gets us out of bed. That's what allows us to exercise. That's what allows us to, of course, the classic example of running from the tiger sort of thing. That's what allows us to mobilize the resources that we need to survive. But most people are not in a survival state in their physical world environment. Most people are doing just fine. But despite that, most people are operating these survival instincts of their autonomic nervous system. And that, again, just kind of makes us more sensitive to the whole TMS phenomenon. It kind of drives that process of tension myositis syndrome, constriction of neurovascular bundles. That all happens, that nervous system activity happens under stress, under sympathetic activity. So combating that, we need to strengthen the resilience of our parasympathetic nervous system, which is one of the processes and strategies or techniques or treatments that is associated with healing TMS, is becoming more accustomed and familiar with and normalizing the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, the healing and relaxing branch of the autonomic nervous system, so that we can send the signals to all the various organs and systems of our body, all the muscles, all the ligaments, all the tendons, that everything's okay, because everything is okay. So it's really just aligning ourselves with the truth. So that's how TMS manifests. It's I should say that's how we're told that TMS manifests: the constriction of neurovascular bundles, the hypoxia, the inflammation, and that all kind of preceded by this nervous system imbalance, more sympathetic nervous system activity, more stress response in the body. And of course, I'm really just scratching the surface. I don't want to go down into the nitty-gritty details of any of this stuff, but I'm just bringing this into the conversation with relation to TMS and how TMS manifests. But I also need to say that these are just theories, or this is the science. This is the physiologic science of how the body works. But there's also the metaphysical side of the manifestation of TMS. There's the side of TMS that we don't understand. There's there's when I use the term metaphysical, as it was described to me, metaphysical is just beyond physical. So the conversation that I just had around the nervous system, parasympathetic, sympathetic branch of the nervous system, constriction, that's all physical stuff. So metaphysical is all the things that are not physical. It's the emotional, mental, psychological, spiritual landscape of our multidimensional being that plays into this. So for example, like this opens up the conversation around like the life lessons that we're here to experience and gain. This opens up the conversation around like, generational trauma, if you will, and the belief systems that we have been programmed with from a very young age, from when we were born, like and updating that and navigating our psychological, emotional, relational landscape of our lives. So like, I think the message here is, yeah, it helps to understand the physiologic mechanisms by which things manifest in our bodies. And also, I think it's super helpful and also super humbling to understand, or at least open up to, really the infinite unknown of all the things that play into our experience of pain and symptoms in our bodies. And just kind of, for me at least, what it looks like is just being okay with that unknown, being okay with not fully understanding, but still surrendering to like, oh my gosh, like I am this multidimensional being. I have these processes unfolding within me, some of which I can grasp and understand and intellectualize, some of which will forever be beyond me. And I can be okay with that. And I can, once again, love, accept, have compassion for myself, and complete unconditional acceptance for being here and now in this state. And again, I know it's easier said than done. I've been there trying at times. And, of course, the funny thing is the harder we try, the further we feel from the experience that we want to have. The greater the distance is when we're trying and attached to something. Anyways, opening yourself up to the metaphysical manifestations of TMS, I think, in my experience, is super helpful and important. Um, and also, it's just the truth because, and that's, I think, what healing comes down to, is just aligning with truth. And if we think that our healing is only accessible physically, like we can only fix ourselves on that physiologic level, whether it's, getting a chiropractic adjustment, whether it's getting acupuncture, whether it's taking a supplement, whether it's understanding our physiology and controlling our nervous system. These are all physical things, right? But it's so helpful and more aligned with truth and the ultimate reality to open yourself up to the fact that our healing, our experience of health is way beyond that physical. We are, in other words, like I like to say, we are multidimensional beings. We are not merely physical beings. So aligning with that truth kind of leaves me or gives me a feeling of kind of relaxation and alignment, I guess, for lack of a better term. So that is, in a nutshell, how TMS manifests, again, both physically, physiologically, and metaphysically. And more, if we were to unpack the metaphysical manifestation of TMS, it's really, endless. It's really limitless to where we can go in that conversation. But again, I'll just share a little bit of my process, and maybe this can be helpful for you. So I talked about the life lessons for what TMS is giving me, what TMS and the symptoms of TMS, what they're giving me, and what, the messages from the universe, in other words, right? Like, being curious as to what those messages are, that can be profoundly healing and can really shift our state of healing like incredibly. And I guess you could maybe say like, okay, like when I have those insights and when I align with that kind of universe or that metaphysical spiritual lesson, then maybe there is this shift physiologically that takes place that opens up and relaxes my nervous system in a more aligned parasympathetic state. Like maybe that multidimensional interconnectedness exists, right? Maybe the spiritual experience triggers the physiologic experience. I'm totally open to that possibility. And I think that that science probably does exist. I think about what has been done, for example, through the Heart Math Institute and things like that. Or Heart Math? Why am I don't know. I forget if there's an institute at the end of Heart Math. Anyways, so that's one example, is just opening up to the lessons. Also, on that level, considering our relationships. And some people, when we're talking about TMS, of course it's common to think about like, okay, stress. We need to control stress. We need to become, well, I like to say, more sensitive to stress. But sometimes the stress is so subconscious. And remember, the whole, when we talked about what is TMS, it's the manifestation of subconscious, unconscious tension in our bodies. So we're not going to see or feel or be able to sense the stress in relationships that I'm talking about. So it is a matter of kind of deeper inquiry, meditation into like, what are these relationships giving me? How can I stay present and aligned within myself? How can I, and for me, again, I can only just share my experience. So for me, it's like, how can I remain totally authentic in myself, not censor myself, not silence myself. What else am I trying to say here? I don't want to put a mask on in any relationship. I want to be myself in every relationship. And sometimes in some relationships, and again, it takes a little bit of contemplation and self-awareness and honesty and humility to like consider like how I'm showing up, whether it's a relationship with family or friends. And staying aligned within my intention and within myself of being totally authentically me. And that is really hard given our societal dynamics and the expectations that we may feel to be or express in some certain way. So I think that there's incredible healing that can come from, again, being authentic, being you, being unapologetically you. And while doing that, like loving yourself, and also loving yourself regardless of how that transpires, interpersonally in relationships. In other words, allowing other people's stuff to be their stuff. Like you're not responsible to how other people sense you or relate to you. You're responsible to being yourself. And obviously, hopefully, we all feel that intrinsic inspiration to be our best self, to be our most compassionate and loving self. It's not in anyone's essence to be mean and to be a bully and to be, to be evil. That's not our essence. We are essentially, every human being, we are good. So we need to trust that. And so anyways, at this point, I'm kind of rambling about some of these metaphysical manifestations. And I guess they do like interconnect and relate with the physiologic manifestations that I was talking about before. So how TMS manifests is complex, and it's okay to be like in the unknown about those complexities, and also in doing so, just kind of be present with yourself and the process. I look forward to in future episodes unpacking, of course, getting into the healing of TMS, I think that it's important to understand that the healing of TMS really involves the understanding of its manifestations. Like we can't just like heal something without knowing where it comes from and how it manifests. That's in other words, like the sequence of this TMS series is intended to give you that understanding and set the stage for the deeper insights and healing that comes from the kind of therapeutic approach to healing TMS, which is in essence simply understanding, simply psychological. There's no physical things that you need to do. However, before that being said, I feel like it's important to just explain real quickly one therapeutic thing, a little teaser before we get into this in future episodes. I talked about the universal nature of TMS and how there's really nothing wrong with you. And today I talked about the manifestation of TMS and how it's really a benign process, and that tension that may or may not experience physiologically, the constriction of neurovascular bundles, it's not creating any pathology in your body. There's nothing that's measurably wrong with you. And maybe you have been told that something's wrong with you. Maybe you have been told that, you've got something out of alignment, whether it's structurally, musculoskeletally, or maybe you've got some lab value that's showing inflammation here, or lab markers out of range there. And those things may exist. But those things very, very, very rarely are the actual cause of your experience of symptoms. So in other words, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. And therefore, one of the most important and powerful things that you can do now, and that hopefully if you are experiencing the symptoms of TMS, hopefully you are already doing this. And if you're not, start doing it. You need to start relating to yourself as if you are perfectly healthy, because you are. So in other words, you need to start being active. You need to start moving your body physically, whether it's running or doing squats or deadlifts or jumping jacks, whatever you are fearing, you need to start doing, because you need to start sending yourself the message that you are okay. And that's one of the most powerful things that we can do to send that message that you are okay, that I am okay, is by doing the things that make me feel okay. And even if I feel a little bit of symptoms, pain or discomfort when I'm doing the things, if you are experiencing TMS, if TMS is the root cause of the thing that you are experiencing, which most likely it is, you are not putting yourself in any danger by doing the things that give you discomfort. You are, however, creating the belief system and starting to tell yourself the truth that you are okay. And that really sets the stage for profound and lasting healing. Doing the things that you feel afraid of in the face of that fear, and then feeling okay and having that kind of grace and compassion with yourself as you become more and more okay with what you're doing. So I wanted to kind of plant that seed for, a therapeutic approach, if you will, before we crack deeper into this in future conversations. So anyways, that kind of wraps up our conversation today around how TMS manifests, the benign process physiologically and also metaphysically. If you're interested in learning more and having more support in healing TMS, reach out. I've got a program that's self-guided, educational. I think I shared about it in a prior episode. I created this really for me. And in doing so, I've, of course, realized like, wow, this is profoundly, insightful stuff. I've been there through the program myself that I created, and it's super helpful. So this program dives into the science and strategy for, transcending TMS with support. And also, I am open to working with people one-on-one in a coaching relationship to help you understand how your body is working and how you can feel better and heal for real from the symptoms of TMS. So anyways, if you are interested in learning more, just reach out. You can find more information at Alter Health, www.alter.health. And I look forward to seeing you next time in this TMS series. Peace and love, you guys. Have a beautiful rest of your day, week, month, holiday season. Cheers.